Chapter 1. The Stain on the Savoy Club.
The winter of 1938 was bitterly cold in Harlem. The wind from the Hudson River carried dampness and the smell of hunger, but inside the Savoy Club, the air was thick with the scent of expensive Cuban cigars, French cologne, and the sweat of frenzied swing dancing. Bumpy Johnson sat at his usual table in the dark corner, his view encompassing the entire room, yet hidden enough that no one dared look him in the eye without permission. He wore a tailored pinstripe suit from Italy, a pristine white shirt collar, and held a glass of cognac. For Bumpy, Harlem was a chessboard, and he was the white piece player, always one step ahead. But tonight that order was broken. The door burst open. Ulysses Rollins entered. He was large, unkempt, smothered in gold, and wore a flamboyant fur coat. Rollins was a rising, young, strong, and wild thug. He didn't have the strategic mind of Bumpy, but he possessed the ferocity of a wild beast vying for territory. He'd won a few small-scale raids, and was beginning to fantasize that Professor Bumpy's time was over. Rollins walked straight to Bumpy's table, his henchmen parting to the sides. The jazz music seemed to fade. The entire audience held their breath. "Hey, old man," Rollins sneered, revealing a gold tooth. "I heard you're still planning on collecting tolls in District 116. That's mine now." Bumpy didn't look up, gently swirling his glass of wine. "Ulysses, you're interrupting my enjoyment of music. Go home while you still have your tongue." Composure provoked the beast within Rollins. He leaned down his face close to Bumpy's and performed an act that would freeze the entire Harlem hell. A glob of slimy saliva fell directly onto Bumpy's polished leather shoe. The space fell silent. Even the band stopped playing. It was the ultimate humiliation. In the underworld, this wasn't a challenge. It was a declaration that the opponent was worth less than a dog. Bumpy's henchmen were about to lunge and draw their guns. But Bumpy raised a finger. Just one finger, and they all stood still like statues. Bumpy slowly pulled a silk handkerchief from his breast pocket. He meticulously and slowly wiped the tip of his shoe clean. His movements were as gentle as wiping a precious chess piece. Then he crumpled the handkerchief, dropped it into his half-empty glass of wine, and stood up. He looked directly into Rollins' eyes devoid of anger, only a deep, dark, and deadly void. "You just made a mistake, Ulysses," Bumpy said, his voice low and soft as a breath. "Enjoy your night." Bumpy turned his back and walked out of the bar. Rollins laughed loudly behind him, thinking Bumpy was old and scared. But he didn't know that the moment Bumpy stepped out the door, the name Ulysses Rollins was erased from the Book of the Dead.
Chapter 2. The Move of Silence.
For the next 3 days, Harlem awaited a bloodbath. But nothing happened. Bumpy didn't send his men to raid, didn't bomb the Rollins house, didn't rob the goods. Bumpy's silence only made Ulysses Rollins more smug, but it also struck fear into the hearts of the seasoned gangsters. They knew Bumpy's style. He didn't bark, he bit, and when he bit, he didn't let go. Bumpy sat in his study, a chessboard in front of him. He was playing alone. "Nat," Bumpy called his trusted bodyguard. "Where does Rollins usually eat dinner?" "He likes Joe's 24-hour diner on the corner of 125th Street, sir. He always goes there at 3 a.m. after getting drunk to eat steak." "How many men does he go with?" "Usually 4. All of them carry guns." "Good. Spread the word that I'm sick bedridden, and tell Joe to let the staff leave early tomorrow night. I want some privacy." Bumpy picked up the queen, twirling it in his hand. He didn't want a noisy gang fight that would attract the police. He wanted a personal punishment, a punishment with a knife, the weapon Rollins prided himself on. Using his enemy's specialty to kill his enemy was the ultimate humiliation.
Chapter 3. The Diner of Death.
3 a.m. Rain poured down on Harlem as if to wash away all sins, but there were stains that couldn't be washed away by water. Ulysses Rollins staggered into Joe's diner. He was drunk, but still sober enough to be arrogant. "Joe Steak! Hurry up!" Rollins yelled, but there was no answer. The diner was deserted. No customers, no chef, only the smell of stale coffee and the sound of rain hitting the window pane. "Joe," Rollins suspiciously pulled out his pistol. His 4 henchmen looked around cautiously. From the darkest corner of the diner, a soft click echoed, the sound of a Zippo lighter. A flame flared up, illuminating the angular face of Bumpy Johnson. He sat there, no gun on the table, only a half-eaten apple pie and a pearl-handled folding knife neatly placed on a napkin. "I've been waiting for you, Ulysses," Bumpy said. "Bumpy?" Rollins chuckled, but it was a crooked laugh. He saw Bumpy was alone. "Are you tired of living, old man? I have 5 guns here, and I have an offer," Bumpy said calmly. "If you open fire, my 20 snipers across the street will turn this bar into a bamboo basket. Look out the window. Look out the casino." Rollins glanced around. In the dim rain across the street, cigarette butts flickered from the rooftops and dark alleyways. He was surrounded, but... Bumpy continued, standing up and taking off his jacket, meticulously rolling up his shirt sleeves. "I don't want to waste bullets on someone like you. I want to teach you a lesson in manners. One-on-one, with a knife. If you win, you can leave. If you lose, you know what will happen." Rollins looked at the knife on the table. He was a street fighter, more confident in his youth and knife skills than in his marksmanship. He thought Bumpy was just a boss who only knew how to give orders old and slow. "All right, old man." Rollins pulled a long dagger from his belt. "I'll slash a new smile across your throat." Bumpy picked up the pearl-handled knife. He pressed a button. Click. A gleaming steel blade sprang out. It was shorter than Rollins's knife, but infinitely sharper.
Chapter 4, The Dance of Blood.
Rollins charged like a bull, swinging his knife wildly. He wanted to overwhelm with brute force. The sound of the knife whistling through the air filled the air. Bumpy didn't back down. He moved. His steps were as graceful as a dancer's, dodging left and right, just enough for Rollins's blade to graze his shirt by a few millimeters. Bumpy didn't attack immediately. He was observing. He saw the impatience in Rollins's eyes, the strong smell of alcohol on his breath, and the deadly flaws in his overly wide swing. "You're too slow," Bumpy whispered. Furious, Rollins lunged at Bumpy's stomach. This was when the trap sprang. Bumpy didn't dodge. He used his left hand to forcefully push Rollins's wrist aside, simultaneously stepping forward, entering his opponent's safe zone. Bumpy's right hand, holding the knife, swung in a perfect arc so fast the naked eye couldn't keep up. Slash. Rollins froze. He felt a chilling sensation on his right cheek. Blood began to gush out. Bumpy had slashed a long gash across his face. "That's for spitting," Bumpy said coldly. Rollins screamed, turning to attack wildly. But this time Bumpy was no longer a gentleman. He had become a monster of killing technique. He dodged the next stab, circled behind Rollins, and delivered a decisive blow to his thigh. Rollins's knees buckled. He was utterly terrified. He realized he was up against a master, not an old man. Bumpy stepped forward, kicking the knife out of Rollins's hand. He grabbed Rollins's hair, yanked his head back, and pressed the icy blade against his throat. 4 of Rollins' henchmen were about to charge, but Bumpy glared. "Anyone who takes a step closer, I'll cut this guy's arteries immediately." They froze. "Ulysses," Bumpy whispered into his enemy's ear. "Do you know why I'm king? Not because I'm the most ruthless, but because I know the rules of the game. And you're just a pawn trying to be a chariot." Spare me, Bumpy. I beg you." Rollins trembled, tears mixing with blood. Bumpy sighed, his face filled with disappointment. "I gave you a chance of honor, but you begged. A mob boss never begs." Bumpy didn't slit his throat. He did something far more terrifying. He slashed an X across Rollins' forehead, the mark of an exile, a death warrant. Then he stabbed him through the heart quickly and cleanly without causing any lingering pain. Rollins collapsed, his eyes still wide open.
Chapter 5, A Message.
Bumpy pulled out a second silk handkerchief he always carried, wiped the blade clean, folded it, and put it in his pocket. He turned to Rollins's trembling henchman. "Dump this body in front of the police station. Tell everyone in Harlem that Ulysses Rollins caught a cold and died. And from now on, anyone who wants to spit, make sure they have enough blood to return." Bumpy left the tavern, opened his umbrella, and walked away into the night. The next morning, Harlem was back to order. No one mentioned Ulysses Rollins' name again. The rebels looked at the cold corpse with the X on its forehead and learned a harsh lesson. You can fight Bumpy Johnson, but never insult his dignity. Because Bumpy didn't just kill, he erased their existence.
The rain tonight in Harlem is bitterly cold, a chill that seeps through my vest and penetrates to the bone. But my hands are warm, not because I'm wearing gloves, but because of the warmth from the recently extinguished life of Ulysses Rollins. People look at me and see a monster. They see a gang leader, a ruthless killer, but they are wrong. They only see the knife, not the chessboard. Tonight, as I walk out of that diner, leaving behind the lifeless corpse of the man who dared to spit in my shoes, I feel no satisfaction. I feel the loneliness of a re-established order. My philosophy of life is simple, yet few understand it. Noise is a sign of weakness. Only silence possesses the power of authority. Ulysses Rollins died the moment he entered the Savoy and caused a commotion. He was like a stupid pawn, charging forward recklessly, unaware he was walking into a death trap. He thought power was shouting a gun in hand and the arrogance of youth. He spat at me, expecting a fit of rage. He wanted me to yell, to pull out my gun and shoot wildly. But I didn't. I wiped my shoes. Why? Because anger is the enemy of reason. If I had shot him, then I would have just been a petty thug. But when I remained silent, I became his obsession. For the past 3 days, I did nothing but that very silence tormented Rollins. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and jumped at the slightest sound. I killed him with fear before my blade even touched his flesh. That's the difference between a street thug and a godfather. I am a chess player, and here in Harlem, every human being is a chess piece. I despise senseless violence. Violence to me is the ultimate means of restoring order, not pleasure. When I drew my knife tonight, it was a ritual. I gave Rollins a chance, a duel. That was a man's self-respect. But what disappointed me most, what made me decide to erase him from this world without hesitation, wasn't the spit. It was when he knelt down. He begged, "Spare me, Bumpy." In that moment, I felt disgusted. A man who dares to challenge the king must have the courage to die like a warrior, but he chose to live like a dog. In this underworld, honor is more precious than life. You can lose, you can die, but you must never lose your integrity. When he begged, he insulted himself and his opponent. I killed him swiftly, a single stab to the heart. That was my final act of kindness. The X on his forehead wasn't a boast. It was a reminder to the rest of Harlem that the price of disrespect isn't death, but annihilation. I walked through the rain, adjusting my collar. Tomorrow the sun would rise again. The people of Harlem would go to work, the children would play, and they would whisper about Rollins's death. They would fear me a little more, but they would also be a little safer. Because as long as Bumpy Johnson was in power, no one would dare disrupt this order. This world is cruel, and it needs monsters in suits like me to keep it from collapsing. I accept being the villain in someone else's story as long as I remain king on my own chessboard.